Sentencing is a matter for our courts, and I celebrate the fact that we have independent courts in this country.
The cherished independence of Britain's courts is, we are so often told, the foundation stone of the rule of law. We have now proved that in 2021, two of this country's most senior judges did not act independently, and that the Ministry of Justice press office lied to ITV to cover that up. Now we're going to demonstrate how this plan to mislead a national broadcaster was carefully coordinated by the judges themselves. We are Hunt and Gather, and you are watching The Other Night. In episode 1, we focused on a lie that I was told by the Ministry of Justice press office when I asked them about a secret meeting that a judge had to talk about a case with someone who wasn't involved. This would be illegal. The press office told me the meeting took place at a large dinner of the Commercial Bar Association. That's a direct quote. We were later told that the date for this was the 22nd of July 2021. We weren't sure about that version of events, given the public attitude to events at the time. It was 3 days after lockdown had ended. We had real doubts about whether the Commercial Bar Association would have held a large dinner under those circumstances. So it was no surprise when the lie was disputed by some very senior lawyers and members of Combar. Here's Lord Grabiner, I don't think your source is credible, he says. Then we have this striking one from a barrister called Michael Howard. Combar doesn't hold dinners. It is simply not that sort of organisation, he said, shortly after telling us that he has been a member of Combar since its inception, and so he ought to know. Remember, this isn't a lie to Hunt and Gather, it's a lie to ITV, who I was working for at the time. This is, in our view, a premeditated attempt by two judges to mislead a national broadcaster. That's the most serious story about public corruption I've ever heard. So we did all we could to prove or disprove it. We sent emails to various people between May and July of 2021. That's me. There are the two judges, two people from Combar, Sonia Delaney, who was the chair when this dinner was said to have happened, and Nick Wood, who was the administrator at the time of my inquiries. And this is Michael Duncan, who was a press officer at the Ministry of Justice. I made a data subject access request, a DSAR, of the judges and the MOJ, asking for copies of all the emails that they had sent about me. So I know what the judges, Combar and the press office were saying to each other about my questions. On the 19th of April, I asked the press officer Michael Duncan about Stephen Mailes's meeting with Duncan Matthews. And on the 3rd of May, he asked the two judges, Cockerell and Mailes, about it. He wrongly assumed to start with that Duncan Matthews was an academic at Queen Mary's University. Now, with this notion about an academic, Michael Duncan is drafting the first of several potential responses that are to be given to me. To show you how many variants there came to be, we'll count them as we go. Now, this response about an academic was never actually sent to me, but a week later I did receive this. Michael Duncan says that the discussion took place because Duncan Matthews was the head of chambers of one of the barristers on the case. He says the discussion was in a professional capacity, etc., etc. This is version number 2 now. But the way he phrased it here, it might have been online for all I knew, so I asked him for more details. On the 19th of May, the press officer emailed the judges to ask for help with what to tell me. Grateful for any thoughts or comments, he says, I suggest that I send the statement in the first instance, and then we can revisit speaking to him off the record if he replies again. Many thank. Well, Lord Justice Mailes didn't like the sound of an off-the-record conversation, it seems, and he responded within half an hour. Dear Michael, he says, I would be concerned about you speaking to a journalist off the record, unless you are certain that you know and can trust him. If you feel that you have to say something, I suggest that you say the following, which is a slightly modified version of your suggestion. Lord Justice Mailes and Duncan Matthews QC both attended an event for judges and barristers. During their conversation there was a very brief reference to the case, but nothing of substance or any details were discussed. Lord Justice Mailes was aware that he would be dealing with the permission to appeal application and it would have been inappropriate to do so. Best wishes, SM. So this is version number 3 that Lord Justice Males is proposing here, an event for judges and barristers, but no further details about it. And at 4:14 in the afternoon, Michael Duncan says he will send me Lord Justice Males' version 3. But he never does, and that's because the next day, the 20th of May, the Lord Justice is back in touch with new instructions. Dear Michael, he says, unless you've already done so, please do not respond to the journalist for the moment. I have received a further communication directly asking for extensive information which may bear on this. So now the process of getting back to me is put on hold. I asked my question on the 17th of May, but I was simply ignored by Michael Duncan until the 9th of June. I eventually got a reply when I sent him this on the 8th of June, and I think the reason he stopped ignoring me is because of this question at the end. I asked him who paid the bill at this meeting. You see, if hospitality is given to a judge, then such hospitality could be seen as a bribe under the Bribery Act 2010. Michael Duncan promises to get back to me, but he doesn't actually do that until the 20th of June, when he gives me the 4th and still the official version. Lord Justice Males and Duncan Matthews QC both attended a large dinner of the Commercial Bar Association. Now this is a speculation, but we think that the story changed because I asked who paid the bill. That question highlighted the need for a setting for this meeting that did not involve Matthews or Males paying for the food and drink. Who paid? Combar paid. That's what they're telling me, and this discussion happened at Combar's event. So I did what any responsible journalist would do. I went to Combar to corroborate the version of events that I'd been given. I've been given information from a reliable source, I said, to the effect that the Commercial Bar Association held a large dinner, this is a quote from the source, for judges and barristers in July 2021. Given that prominent politicians have been issued with fixed penalty notices for holding gatherings around this time, I'm requesting a response to this allegation. And I received a response the same day at 2:28. This is from Nick Wood, the administrator. Your source can only be referring to the dinner held on the 22nd of July 2021, she says. The lockdown restrictions had been lifted by then, so I don't think the allegation, as you put it, has any substance. So that's the answer that I got on the 22nd of June. What happens next is a powerful piece of evidence of this conspiracy. 3 days after I first asked Combar about the event, this email is sent. It's from Stephen Males' DSAR response, so it's either to him or from him. That information's all been redacted in white, unusually, along with most of the body of the email. But what it does say is, an ITV journalist, Callum Watkinson, has in the past 48 hours been making inquiries with respect to the Combar dinner on the 22nd of July 2021. So we know this is an email that Stephen Males either sent or received on the 24th of June, and we know that it is about Combar because they are who I had been asking questions of over the previous 48 hours. So it looks like Combar and the judges were staying in touch about my inquiries. We can't think of an innocent reason for that. Now we're going to need another counter here because this is the first of 3 times that Combar go back to the judges in a bid, we think, to keep these narratives consistent. On the 4th of July 2022, I wrote a long email to Barrister Sonia Delaney, who had been the chair of Combar the previous year and therefore had been in charge on the date when I was being told this dinner had been held. This was just 3 days after full COVID lockdown ended on the 19th of July 2021, I told her. On that day, the government stressed that cautious guidance will remain, making it clear this is not yet a return to normal. While cases are high and rising, everybody needs to continue to act carefully and remain cautious. This is a peculiar backdrop against which to hold a large dinner, particularly for a serious professional organisation committed to the rule of law. I asked Ms Delaney questions about social distancing, mask use, a pre-registration, but instead of receiving answers to my questions, something similar happens again. I had emailed her at 8:51. As I sat waiting for a reply to me, instead, at 2:59, Michael Duncan gets an email about me from Sarah Cockrell. Dear Michael, she says, I am just contacting you because I have been told that Combar have been contacted by this journalist, who has been making inquiries about the event, attendance and COVID measures. It may therefore be that he will be back in contact with the press office. To answer the question which is bound to come to your mind, the event took place after COVID restrictions were lifted. Best wishes, Sarah. I have been told that Combar have been contacted by this journalist. Been told by who exactly and why? I had emailed Sonia Tillaney in the morning. Nobody had suggested to Combar that Sarah Cockrell was at the dinner, but they told her about my inquiry within hours. And because of that communication, here she is, coaching a press officer about what to say to me, anticipating a point that she thinks I'm going to raise about the date, and feeding him a pre-prepared answer. This was the second time Combar relayed my inquiry to one or both of these judges. The only explanation we can think of is the information being given to me about the large dinner was false, and the cover story was being coordinated by Sarah Cockrell. If anyone has a better explanation, we'd be keen to hear it. We infer that it was then decided by someone that Nick Wood, not Sonia Tillaney, would reply to me. Despite my having already corrected your reference to the private dinner on 22nd of July 2021, etc., etc., right now this is version number 5 of the dinner. I was told it was large. It's now being, for the first time, characterised as private after I asked questions about COVID measures. Miss Wood then provided more information. She said this was a regular annual event. Well, if it was a regular annual event, there should be evidence of a corresponding event taking place in 2020, 2019 and so on. Well, we can't find any such evidence. If anyone can provide it, we'd be keen to see it. Miss Wood ends her email. If you still intend to publish a report about this, Combar will send you a statement to include in any such report. So that is a promise of a statement from Combar if I decide to publish. Remember that. Now, I got the impression that Miss Tillaney preferred not to have her name on this email chain. I wasn't comfortable with that, given that she had been the chair, not Nick Wood. So I copied her into my reply. I pointed out to Miss Wood and Miss Tillaney that Miss Wood hadn't worked for Combar at the time of these events. Now, you'll remember that she offered me a statement on July the 5th, so I asked her for one, and I asked her to get it certified by members of Combar who had been involved in planning the dinner. I asked about the venue, the guests, the COVID-19 risk assessment, the ventilation, the wearing of masks, and the use of test and trace. I also asked for a copy of the invitation, a contemporaneous document which must have been sent to a large number of people. I sent Michael Duncan a similar email the same morning in which I asked him about attendees, the electronic invite, masks and social distancing. It must have been apparent by this stage that I was asking for corroborating evidence which simply did not exist.
We've got to remember that this virus is sadly still out there. Cases are rising. We can see the extreme contagiousness of the Delta variant. I'm going to be self-isolating until the 26th of July, Monday, the 26th of July. And I know how frustrating it all is, but I really do urge everybody to stick with the programme and take the appropriate course of action when you're asked to do so by NHS Test and Trace. Please, please, please be cautious.
Pre-registration, test and trace, invite, diary entries. Nobody could have held a large dinner of lawyers on the 22nd of July 2021 without leaving a cogent trail of documentary evidence, many bits of which I was now asking to see. That evidence trail does not exist because we believe the dinner never took place. What happened next is significant. Both my emails, sent to Combar 7 days apart, are forwarded on Tuesday the 12th of July to Sarah Cockrell. So that's the third time that Combar have informed these judges about an inquiry of mine. So for the third time, the only explanation we can think of is that Sonia Tillaney and Nick Wood knew that Cockrell was coordinating the story about the large dinner of Combar, and to do that, she needed to see my inquiries in full. It seems a decision was then made that I should be told to direct all inquiries to Combar. That would mean that the Ministry of Justice would not have to lie to a national broadcaster any more than it already had, and Combar could then simply refuse to provide any more information, and that is exactly what happened. At 9:14, Michael Duncan, the press officer, replied to my email of the previous day. I think the question that you are asking, number of attendees, nature of dinner, etc., are best directed to the Commercial Bar Association. It was their event. So Lord Justice Males and the Ministry of Justice were not willing to provide any corroboration. That is now being made clear. They say all questions should go to Combar. Now you'll remember that they offered me a statement on the 5th of July, and on the 11th of July I asked for one. Now they are telling me, we do not believe that further correspondence on this matter will be productive. No more correspondence, which means no statements.
By this point, it looked very much like these two judges were conspiring to mislead me, and that Sonia Delaney, who is now the head of one of London's most prestigious barristers' sets, might be in on the scheme. So I wrote her this email in December that year.
Dear Sonia, I said, I hope you don't mind too much me contacting you again. I have a further question regarding the large dinner of the Commercial Bar Association that Nick Wood and the judiciary have told me was held on 22nd of July 2021, and which I have asked you about previously. Sarah Cockrell has now given me a copy of an email which shows that rather than answer my query to you on the 4th of July 2022, it was instead brought to her attention within hours, if not moments, of receipt. This was done either by telephone or face-to-face as far as I can make out. It also looks from other information Mrs. Cockrell has given me that when I followed up with you on the 11th of July 2022, the same thing happened again. The query was passed to her. She responded to the information forwarded to her on July the 4th by coaching a Ministry of Justice press officer about what to say to me about the matter. It seems to me quite strange for a senior judge to be getting involved in the nuts and bolts of a press office response in this way. What is in my view even stranger is that Mrs. Cockrell was not mentioned in my inquiry to you, yet she was made aware of my question in short order. Can I ask why you decided to loop her in? Why was she, in your mind, relevant? Kind regards, Callum Watkinson. Well, Miss Delaney did not feel it was in her interests to respond to that email. We have now shown you that Sarah Cockrell and Duncan Matthews were in touch about a legal case whilst it was ongoing. It was a month before she conducted a consequentials hearing, and she knew there was an appeal planned. She was the active judge. She should not have been speaking to anyone about that case. We believe that Stephen Mayles met Duncan Matthews and discussed the King and Stiefel case, as his email indicates he did. I did not want to say much means he did say something. Stephen Mayles later reported back to Duncan Matthews, "You will see how I dealt with this," he says, with a Microsoft Word draft of his decision attached. Lord Justice Mayles should not have been discussing that case with anyone at any time. Duncan Matthews should not have known which judge had carriage of that appeal, but somehow he did. A third party discussing a pending appeal with an appeal judge outside court while it's going on is a breach of the law. The consequences for Cockrell, Matthews and Mayles of the truth emerging about these events would be severe. They would tend to show a conspiracy to interfere with the proper course of public justice. So we think that they all decided to cover up what had happened to avoid being held to account by telling a lie to a national broadcaster who had asked them about it. We don't believe there was a large dinner of Combar on the 22nd of July 2021. As Michael Howard, a founding member of the organisation, told us, Combar does not hold dinners. Combar is simply not that sort of organisation. What we have shown you in this episode is that Stephen Mayles and Sarah Cockrell, two of the most senior judges in this country, played a central role in coordinating a false account which was fed to ITV over a number of weeks. That's why the story kept changing, and it's why Combar kept going back to the judges. If you live in the UK, this woman will be your Deputy Head of Civil Justice come November, and this man is sitting in your Court of Appeal. I just want to end with a couple of simple questions. These two judges are at the height of their careers. Do you think they've only just started behaving this way? And do you think they're the only judges that do?